Suffocating, like who even says that? Who calls their wife static? I thought about the last 15 years. All the times I stayed up late, helping him with presentations, or how I handled the entire social calendar so he didn't have to. I'd basically stepped back from my own goals to make sure the house was a sanctuary for him. I spent a decade and a half trying to make his life as easy as possible. And I guess that was the problem. I made things so seamless that I just became part of the furniture. Anyway, I started looking into Lily's business. She had a small gallery in the design district. The website was very minimal and looked expensive. I saw a section for upcoming exhibitions and noticed one of the main donors was a private trust. I dug into that using some of the stuff I found in Mark's personal archives, folder secret account numbers, and trust names. He wasn't just spending $4,000 a month on hotels. He'd set up a trust to fund her gallery. He was basically paying for her career with money we'd earned together. Money that should be been for retirement. Or for kids, which we didn't have because Mark said he was too stressed to deal with them. I sat in my office with the act humming, and I actually felt a weird spark of something. Not happiness, but satisfaction. He thought he was the one in control, but had been sloppy. He just assumed I was too static to ever actually look for the truth. He thought I was too tired to imagine he was capable of this. Over the next few days, I found more Lily wants, just a mistress, she was a business partner. They were planning something. I found messages about a villa in Mexico they were looking to buy together. He was using the secret account for the down payment. It wasn't just the cheating. It was a financial thing. He was stealing our future to build a playground for himself and a woman who thought he was an adventurer. I remember the day I found the last piece of evidence. It was late afternoon, and the Texas sun was hitting the windows of the clinic, making everything look bleached. I was cleaning the teeth of a man who'd been coming to me for 5 years. He was talking about his grandkids, and I was just nodding, but I was thinking about that villa in Mexico. When I got home, Mark was already there, drinking a scotch and reading something on his tablet. He looked so comfortable. "Hey," he said without looking up, "the Hoa is emailing about the lights again. Just take care of it, okay?" I looked at him. I looked at his watch. I looked at the man I'd spent 15 years taking care of. "Sure, Mark, I can handle that," I said. My voice was just flat. I wasn't shaking anymore. It wasn't really rage, it was just cold. I knew if I asked him about it now, he'd just do the same thing he always does. He'd tell me I was unstable or imagining things. He'd use my history of being sensitive to make me look like a liar. He probably already had a lawyer on speed dial. He'd spent years making me doubt my own eyes. But I didn't doubt them anymore. I had the spreadsheets, the screenshots, the bank statements, the trust, the villa. I went into the kitchen and started making dinner, roast with carrots and potatoes. I took my time with it, just focusing on chopping the vegetables and stirring the gravy. While I worked, I checked my 401k. It wasn't as much as I wanted, but it was mine. Then I checked the joint account. I realized I didn't want a fair divorce. Fair is for people who actually follow the rules. Mark had made up his own rules in secret, where he got everything, and I just handled the chores. I didn't want a fair settlement. I wanted everything gone. After dinner, Mark went upstairs to take a call. I stayed downstairs and went back to the laptop. I started looking for lawyers, not just any lawyer, but the kind that do high-asset divorces. The kind who find hidden trusts and properties in other countries. The ones who aren't nice. I found a woman in Dallas who had a reputation for being a shark. Her website was simple, but the reviews were kind of terrifying. I paused before clicking contact. I looked around my living room, the beige curtains, the neutral rug. The house we built to show everyone we were successful. I realized I hated the house. I hated the white granite countertops. I hated how the AC felt like a refrigerator. Everything in the room was designed to be boring and unobtrusive. I clicked the button and sent the email. I didn't feel a rush or anything. Everything just clicked. Like for the first time in years, the inside and outside matched. I went upstairs and got into bed. Mark was already asleep, breathing heavy. I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, just listening to the house. I thought about Lily J. Miller and her gallery. I thought about the villa in Mexico. I wondered if she knew her adventurer spent his weekends worrying about the ivy on a fence in Frisco. I wondered if she knew her funding came from the predictable wife he hated. I didn't sleep well, but I didn't feel like I was disappearing anymore. I felt visible, even if I was the only one who knew. I woke up at 6 a.m. I got dressed, packed a turkey sandwich on wheat, and went to the kitchen. Mark came in, smelling like coffee and cologne. Did you see the email from the Hoa? He asked, checking his watch icon at Mark, I said, and I gave him a small smile. Everything is under control. He nodded, satisfied, and walked out the door. I stood there and looked at the white granite. I just thought about how much his face is going to look when he finally gets served. So I emailed Sarah Vance, and she didn't get back to me for 2 days. I was losing it, just checking my phone every 5 minutes and wondering if I'd messed everything up. Mark was actually in a great mood during that time. He started bringing me random things lilies from the store, those expensive chocolates I like. It was such a typical move. Whenever he felt like I was finally falling back in line, he'd reward me. It honestly felt like he was training a dog. Then Thursday morning, I finally got a short email from Sarah. She said she'd gone through the documents and that I had a strong case, but we had to be smart about it. She wanted me to come into her Dallas office the next day at 10. I told Mark I had a follow-up appointment at the dentist to get a filling checked. Since I'm a dental hygienist, he didn't even blink. He just told me to be careful in traffic and reminded me we had a dinner party with the Millers on Saturday, not Lily Miller, just the couple from down the street. The drive into Dallas was absolute trash. The North Tollway was basically a parking lot. I sat there for 40 minutes staring at the bumper of a white Tesla, listening to a true crime podcast that felt a little too relatable. By the time I got to the high-rise in Uptown, I was sweating through my blouse and felt kind of sick. Sarah Vance's office was exactly what you'd expect, all glass and chrome, with a huge view of the skyline. Sarah didn't really do the friendly thing, she just seemed very blunt and professional. She looked like the kind of lawyer who charges way too much per hour and doesn't apologize for it. "Sit down, Nora," she said, pointing to a leather chair without even shaking my hand. She had all my spreadsheets and screenshots printed out in folders. She didn't waste time with small talk. For the first hour, she just grilled me. She wanted to know everything about the joint accounts, the dates of the Mexico trips, and exactly how I found the personal archives folder. "The trust is the main thing," Sarah said, tapping her pen on a page. She explained that since we're in Texas, community property laws apply. If has been funneling marital money into a private trust for someone else, that's misappropriation. We could argue that money belongs back in the marital estate before we even start dividing assets. It just clicked for me right then. He wasn't just managing money. He was stealing. And the villa? I asked. She said, if the down payment came from that secret account, we might be able to put a lien on it or claim some of the equity. But she was very clear that we couldn't let him know yet. If he suspected I knew about the trust, he'd just move the money offshore or into a shell company, and then we'd be chasing ghosts. The retainer fee was a gut punch. It was a huge chunk of the personal savings spent years building up. But as I signed the paperwork, I didn't really panic. It felt like I was paying for my freedom. When I got home, the whole house felt fake. The beige walls, the rugs, everything just looked like a stage set. I walked into the kitchen and saw Mark pouring a glass of water. He gave me that same practiced smile he always has. "How is the dentist?" he asked. "Fine, just a quick check," I said. I'd practiced the line the whole way home. "Good. Don't forget the Millers on Saturday." I told Greg would do the ribeye. I got the sides, I told him. I went upstairs to change. I spent a while just staring at my closet, feeling completely detached, before I realized I was just wasting time. I ended up just sitting on the edge of the bed for a few minutes, trying to breathe. That evening, we sat on the patio. The Texas heat was finally breaking, and there was a breeze. Mark was complaining about some project in the Midwest and how inefficient his managers were. I just nodded and pretended to listen, but I was actually just imagining the look on his face when he got served. I started thinking about the last 15 years. I'd spent so much energy trying to be the perfect wife. I handled every birthday, managed the budget so he could have the best suits and gadgets. I took a steady, low-stress job at the clinic because Mark told me he needed me to be stable at home. He used the word stable like it was a compliment, but it was really just a way to keep me in a box. He didn't want a partner, he wanted someone to handle all the boring stuff so he could do whatever he wanted. The next 2 weeks were basically one big act. I became the most attentive version of myself. I cooked his favorite meals, listened to his work drama, and even suggested a weekend trip to the hill country in December. He loved it. He actually hugged me from behind one morning while I was making coffee. I felt a wave of revulsion so strong, I almost gagged, but I just forced myself to lean back into him. I just had to hold it together. While he was enjoying how much better our marriage had become, I was meeting Sarah twice a week. We were building a mountain of evidence. Sarah had a pie tracking him, and it turned out he wasn't just visiting Lily in Dallas. He was spending 3 nights a week at a luxury apartment shed rented in the design district. Paid for by another secret account. He's arrogant, Sarah told me. He thinks he's above the rules, so he doesn't think he needs to hide the paper trail. She showed me he was using a corporate card for business expenses that were obviously personal. We documented every dinner, every hotel, every piece of jewelry he bought her. I asked if I should just tell him I knew. Absolutely not, she said. The surprise is your only leverage. If you confront him now, he'll scrub the accounts. We wait until the filing is ready and the accounts are frozen. We hit him all at once. The waiting was the hardest part. Sometimes I felt like I was actually losing my mind. I'd be standing in the grocery store looking at pumpkins, and I'd suddenly remember a text I'd found where he called me static. I'd just stand there, clutching a bag of kale, feeling this cold anger in my chest. I started noticing things about Mark that I'd ignored for years. The way he talked over me, how he never asked about my day unless he wanted to know if a chore was done. He just assumed I'd always be there like a piece of furniture. One Saturday, while Mark was at the gym, I went through his phone. He'd started leaving it unlocked because he felt so secure in my stability. I found messages from Lily. They were planning a trip to Mexico City for the holidays. He was talking about the villa again, mentioning how they could start their real life once he liquidated some stagnant assets. I wondered if I was one of those assets. I didn't even take screenshots this time. I didn't need to. I just read them. I felt kind of detached, like I was reading a script for a movie I wasn't in anymore. One Tuesday at the clinic, I was working on a Pashanta woman in her 60s who always complained about her gums. While I worked, she started telling me about her own divorce from 20 years ago. She said Shed felt like she was disappearing for a decade, and that the day she left was the first day she could actually breathe. "You've got a look on your face, honey," the woman said while I was rinsing her mouth. "Like you're keeping a secret." I just smiled and told her she had a great imagination. But as she left, I felt a lump in my throat. I wasn't disappearing. I was just hiding. The financial plan Sarah was setting up was complicated. We weren't just divorcing, we were doing a total reclamation. Sarah was preparing to freeze the joint accounts and the secret account the moment he was served. Shed found a way to link the secret account to a corporate tax loophole he'd been using, which meant the heirs might actually get interested in his logistics. That's the extreme option, Sarah warned me. It could complicate things, but it ensures he can't hide anything. He'll be too scared of an audit to fight you on the house. I told her to keep it in her back pocket. I didn't want to destroy his Kara, not yet. I just wanted what was mine. The house, the retirement funds, and a big chunk of that trust. By the end of November, the tension in the house was unbearable. Not for Mark, he had no idea, but for me. Every time he touched me or told me he loved me, it felt like a physical assault. I started spending more time in the garden, pretending to be obsessed with winter mulch, just so I didn't have to be in the same room as him. One evening, I was cleaning up after dinner. I was scrubbing a pot when I noticed a red notification light on Mark's tablet. It was an email from a real estate agent in Mexico. The subject line was closing dates for Villa Esperanza. I stood there for a minute, holding the scrub brush, just looking at the tablet. I thought about the 15 years. The grilled chicken, the HOA meetings, the way I'd shrunk my whole life to fit into his. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the tablet through the window and wake him up and tell him I knew everything, but I didn't. I just turned off the faucet and dried my hands. I went into the living room where he was watching a game. He looked over and smiled. "You okay, Nora? You look a little pale. I'm just tired, Mark, I said. Long day at the clinic. Maybe you should take a bath, he suggested, turning back to the TV. You've been so wound up lately. You need to relax. I looked at him and realized he didn't even see me. He didn't see the woman who had spent the last month mapping out his financial ruin. He saw a tired dental hygienist who needed a bath. He was so sure he was superior that he couldn't see what was coming. That night, I lay in bed and listened to him sleep. I thought about Sarah Vance and the folders of evidence. I thought about the plan for the first week of December. I didn't feel tired anymore. I just felt a strange, cold clarity. The following Monday, I had one last meeting with Sarah. We finalized everything. The petition was drafted, the affidavits were done, and the freeze orders were ready. Everything is in place, Sarah said. The process server is on standby. We'll hit him Friday morning while he's at the office so he doesn't have time to move funds. I signed the final document. As I walked out into the sun, I felt a weight lift. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't playing a role. I drove home, stopping at Target to pick up some new towels for the guest bathroom. I spent a long time looking at the colors and eventually picked a deep charcoal. When I got home, Mark was in the driveway washing his car. He looked up and waved, looking totally confident. "Hey babe, you're home early," he called out. "I am," I said, getting out of the car. "Thought I'd start getting the house ready for the holidays." "That's my girl," he said, walking over to kiss my forehead. I stood there, smelling the soap and the wax on his car, and I smiled. It wasn't exactly a fake smile. I just knew exactly how this was going to end. I went inside and started putting the towels in the bathroom. I folded them carefully, aligning the edges perfectly. Everything in the house was in its proper place. I just had to survive 4 more days. So I live in Frisco, Texas. And if you've ever been here, you know the humidity is basically just disgusting. It was one of those mornings where it felt like I was wearing a wet blanket by 7:30. I was in the kitchen, packing my lunch, just some turkey on wheat, and the usual while the dishwasher was running. I remember just staring at the countertops. Mark insisted on this specific white granite when we built the house, but honestly, it just looks cold, like a dentist's office, which is fitting, because that's where I spend my entire life. Mark came in wearing his work clothes and smelling like way too much cologne. He didn't even really look at me, just went straight for the coffee. He's a VP for some logistics company, so his whole world is just schedules and spreadsheets. For the last 15 years, I feel like I've just been trying to fit into the gaps of his calendar. He asked if I'd called the hoe about the fence. I told him yeah, that they're fine with the ivy as long as it stays under 4 feet, but he didn't even respond. He was already scrolling through his phone, sighed, and just walked out. I stood there for a minute, holding my yogurt, listening to the garage door close. The drive to the clinic is usually 20 minutes, but it's just a slog. I've been a dental hygienist at a private practice for years. It's a steady job and the benefits are good, though I don't even really know where my 401k is. It just feels like money for some future version of me. The office always smells the same peppermint and that metallic blood smell. My whole day is basically just leaning over people and scraping their teeth, and my neck is always killing me by noon. I'll ask patients about their weekends, they'll tell me, and then they just stop. They never really ask about me. I got pretty good at just nodding and acting like I'm listening, while I'm actually just counting down the minutes until my break. Around 11, I had Mrs. Gable. She lives in my neighborhood, but I'm pretty sure she only knows me as the hygienist. She spent the whole appointment bragging about her daughter's wedding in Napa and how divine the flowers were. I just kept polishing her teeth and nodding in my area. Everything is just about how big your house is or what kind of SUV you drive. Mark has all that, I just have the schedule. I think it was a Tuesday or maybe Wednesday. When things started feeling off with Mark, it wasn't one big fight or anything. Just small things. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. He was working late on these quarterly projections, but he wasn't actually getting any bonuses. He stopped asking about my day. I'd try to tell him something weird that happened at the store, and he'd just give me a onward answer while staring at his screen. Anyway, I got home that afternoon and the AC was blasting. We keep it at 68, which is probably too cold, but it's the only way to survive the Texas heat. The house was dead quiet. Everything was perfectly in place, which honestly just made it feel weird. I started cleaning. I don't know, it's just what I do when I'm stressed. I was scrubbing the kitchen counters, and I noticed this small brown stain near the sink. It had been there for a while, and I spent like 10 minutes just getting annoyed that it wouldn't come off. I actually went into the pantry to check my other cleaners to see if I should use bleach, wondering if that would ruin the finish. I spent a good chunk of my afternoon worrying about a smudge the size of a dime, and the Wi-Fi was acting up, which just made the whole thing more irritating. After the kitchen, I went into the linen closet to find the guest towels because Mark's parents were coming next weekend. I was reaching for the top shelf, moving some old beach towels we never use. I was pushing a plastic bin of Christmas decorations, and my hand hit something. It was a small black leather portfolio tucked way back in the corner. I pulled it out. It wasn't one of his work. Foldersos are always navy or gray with the company logo. This one was plain and felt heavy. I just sat down on the floor of the closet. It smelled like laundry detergent and mothballs in there. I didn't want to be the wife who snoops. I've always tried to be the easy one, the one who keeps everything running so Mark could just focus on his career. I figured if the house was clean and the Hoa was happy, the marriage would just work like a transaction. But the house was too quiet. I opened it. It wasn't taxes or insurance. There was a passport I didn't recognize, some handwritten notes on hotel stationery from Mexico, and a bunch of photos. The first one was Mark. He was laughing, with his arm around a woman I'd never seen. She looked younger, maybe 30, with dark hair. They were on a beach with bright blue water, and Mark looked relaxed. He wasn't checking his watch or looking stressed. He just looked happy. I looked through the rest. Dinners, walking through some old streets, a photo of them with wine on a balcony. Some had dates on the back. Mid-August, they were in Cabo for a week. I remember that week. Mark told me he was at a leadership retreat in Scottsdale. While he was there, I was dealing with the landscapers and taking my mom to her heart doctor. Then I saw the passport. It wasn't the woman's. It was a second passport for Mark. I didn't even know you could have two. I just sat there in the dark for a while. I felt this weird cold feeling. I looked at the beige walls and the expensive floors, and I just felt sick. I closed the folder and pushed it back exactly where I found it, behind the ornaments. I stood up, brushed the dust off my leggings, and went back to the kitchen. I looked at that brown stain on the counter. I didn't even try to scrub it again. I just left it. I'm literally shaking as I type this. I don't even know if I should confront him or just start calling lawyers. Has anyone else dealt with this? What do I even do with the passport? I didn't really sleep that first night. I just lay there listening to Mark breathe. He sounded, I don't know, just totally fine. Like he didn't have a care in the world. I stayed on my side of the bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what else he was hiding in this house. We spent so much time making the place look perfect for the neighbors and the Hoa that I think we just stopped actually living in it. The next night, I waited until he was done with dinner. I'd made grilled chicken and broccoli, the usual bland, healthy stuff we eat, because we're both watching our cholesterol. He was just scrolling through emails, like always. I found the black portfolio, I said. My voice sounded thin. Mark didn't even look up, he just kept scrolling. The what? The leather folder. In the linen closet behind the Christmas bins. The one with the passport and the photos from Mexico. He stopped then. He didn't jump or anything, he just slowly put the phone down and looked at me. He didn't look guilty. He just looked annoyed, the way he does when I forget to put the trash bins out on Tuesday. Nora, why are you snooping in the closet? Snooping? Mark, there's a second passport in there, and photos of you with a woman on a beach. You told me you were in Scottsdale for a retreat in August. He sighed. It was this long, dramatic sound, like I was the one being unreasonable. He leaned back and crossed his arms. It's not what you think. That folder, it's for work. The logistics company has international contracts, and we have to use different documentation for some regions to avoid delays. It's corporate stuff, Nora. It's complicated. Why can't you just trust me for once? I just stared at him. The woman, Mark, who is she? He paused for a second. I thought he might actually tell me. Instead, he just gave me this little smile. She's a consultant. We were at a site visit. The photos are just social. We had a few drinks, took some pictures. It's called networking. I didn't mention it because I knew you'd get like this. You've been so wound up lately. I think the stress at the clinic is finally getting to you. It was just so fast. 1 second I'm asking what he did, and the next I'm just a stressed out dental hygienist who can't handle his career. I'm not getting like this, I said. My voice was shaking. You lied about where you were. You lied about who you were with. I didn't lie, he said. His voice was getting firmer. I just didn't tell you because you're so sensitive, honestly. This is why I don't tell you things. You turn everything into a drama. It's exhausting. I come home from a 10-hour day managing 300 people, and I have to deal with an interrogation in my own dining room. He stood up and went to the kitchen to put his plate in the dishwasher. He didn't even look back. Maybe you should take a few days off. Go to a spa. Get some perspective. You're acting unstable. I didn't scream or throw anything. I just sat there and watched him load the dishwasher. He was so focused on it, everything in its proper slot. He basically flipped the whole script in 5 minutes. He didn't just lie. He tried to make me feel crazy for even noticing. I didn't really say much for the next few days. We just went through the motions. We talked about the weather, or the noise from the construction on the next block, and whether we should get the lawn aerated before the first frost. I played the part of the sensitive wife, but inside I was keeping track of everything. I started thinking about the money. Mark handled everything: taxes, investments, the mortgage. I have my own paycheck, but most of it went into a joint account he managed for efficiency. I knew we were comfortable. We had the house in Frisco, the luxury subs, the vacations, but I didn't actually know where the money was. I didn't know if we had $1 million or if we were drowning in debt to pay for his networking in Cabo. Around mid-October, he left for a 3-day trip to Houston. He said it was for stakeholder meetings, but I didn't believe a word of it. The second he pulled out of the driveway, I went into his office. The office was the only room that was truly his. I started with the desk drawers, looking for the physical tax returns from the last few years. I struggled with the bottom drawer for a minute because it was jammed, but I finally yanked it open. I found a folder labeled Personal Archives. Inside were the tax returns. I'm not an accountant, but I can read a balance sheet. I started looking at the deposits in our joint account versus the reported income. Something was off. There were gaps, large sums of money moving out of an account I'd never heard of. It was a secondary account at a bank in the city. He'd been transferring about $4,000 a month into it for the last 3 years. I sat in his leather chair, the one that cost more than my first Karen. I just felt this strange clarity. He tried to call me unstable to protect this, but it just woke me up. I wasn't just a dental hygienist who cleaned teeth and nodded at people's stories. I knew how to find a hidden account. I spent the next 6 hours on my laptop digging through old emails he'd forgotten to delete. He thought he was smart, but he'd used the home Wi-Fi to access a travel portal called Elite Escapes. I found the bookings. Cabo, Tuluma Hotel in Mexico City. Every single trip lined up with a business conference or a leadership retreat. He hadn't just been cheating. He had a whole parallel life funded by a secret account, all while telling me I was too sensitive. I remember looking at the dates. He took her to a resort in May. I remember that weekend. I spent it cleaning out the garage and helping my sister move her kids into a new apartment. I'd sent him texts telling him I missed him, and he'd responded with, "Miss you too, honey. This meeting is brutal, can't wait to get home to you." I actually started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so pathetic. I didn't delete anything. I didn't leave a note. I took photos of every document, every email, and every bank statement and uploaded them to a secure cloud drive. He doesn't know about. I even found a digital copy of that second passport. It was legitimate, but it was registered as Mason D. Thompson, using his middle name to keep it separate. By the time I heard his car in the driveway, on Thursday evening, I had a full map of everything. He walked through the door, looking tired, carrying his briefcase and some overpriced airport snacks. He smiled at me, that same practiced smile he uses for the hoa board. "Hey babe, miss me?" he asked, leaning in to kiss my cheek. I didn't pull away. I stood there for a minute and let him kiss me, feeling the scratch of his 5 o'clock shadow. I wondered if he could tell I was different, or if I'd finally become the version of me. He wanted the one who just blends into the background. I missed you. I lied. How was your week? He asked, heading to the bedroom to change. It was quiet, I said. I just did some cleaning. I followed him in and watched him take off his tie. I thought about the folder in the closet, the secret account, and the woman in Mexico. I thought about the 15 years I spent making sure his life was seamless, making sure the house was spotless, and the schedule was kept, while I'd basically just been his favorite piece of furniture. And the worst part? He actually had the nerve to ask about Thai food afterward. I told him that sounded fine. I spent the rest of the night acting exactly like the woman he thought I was. I listened to him talk about his meetings in Houston, the difficult stakeholders, and the projections. I nodded in all the right places. I even asked if he wanted a glass of wine. As I poured the wine, I looked at the white granite countertops. I didn't know what my next move was, if I'd call a lawyer tomorrow or wait until I had more evidence. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel tired. I felt awake. I put the wine glasses on the coasters and walked back into the living room. So for the next couple of weeks, I just played along. I went back to being the version of Nora that Mark licked, the quiet one who didn't cause any problems. I pressed his shirts, kept the kitchen spotless, and I even started asking him about his work stuff, like those quarterly projections and whatever supply chain mess he was dealing with in the Midwest. I don't actually care about any of that, but he loved it. He started doing this thing where he touched my shoulder when he walked past me in the hall. It used to be sweet, but now it just felt weird, like he was just checking to make sure I was still under control. While he was happy with himself, I was spending every second I could on my laptop. I had the emails and the travel logs, but I didn't have a full name for her. In the emails, she was just L, but in the hotel bookings, it said Lily J. Miller. I tried LinkedIn first since she was in Dallas. I figured that'd be the easiest way. I searched Lily Miller and filtered for the Dallas-Fort Worth area, but there were dozens of them. Real estate agents, nurses, lawyers. None of them looked like the woman in the photos. The woman in the photos just had this look, I don't know, like she didn't have to try. She definitely wasn't spending her mornings worrying about HOA rules or flossing patients' teeth. She just looked like that. Then I tried Instagram. I searched Lily Miller Dallas and found a public profile. The profile picture was her standing in front of some modern art piece in a linen dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. That was her. Same hair, same way she tilted her head. I spent like 3 hours scrolling. It was a totally different life. Rooftop bars in Uptown, weekends in Austin, trips to Cabo and Tulum. She was smart enough not to post Mark's face, but he was there. An arm around her waist at a vineyard, or a hand holding a wine glass in a sunset photo. The captions were the worst part. One said, "Best trip ever," another one was, "So grateful for this life." I looked at my own life and I don't know. It wasn't an adventure, it was just a bunch of appointments. I have a 401k, a steady job at the clinic, and a house that looks exactly like every other house on the street. I realized Mark didn't just find another woman, he'd found a way to be a different person. With me, he was the VP of logistics who cared about spreadsheets and how high the ivy grew on the fence. With Lily, he was some adventurer who liked modern art. I guess I was just the one keeping the house running, so he had the freedom to go be that guy in the city. I felt sick, but I didn't cry. I was kind of past that. I just had this cold knot in my stomach. I wanted to know how long this had been going on, so I went back to the Elite Escapes emails and started a spreadsheet. I spent the whole weekend mapping out every trip and every secret dinner. Sometime in early November, I found an email from Mark to Lily from 3 years ago. It was a long one. He talked about how stifling things were at home. He called me predictable and static. He said he loved the life he'd built, but he felt like he was suffocating in the silence of our marriage. He told her she was the only person who actually saw him. I just kept reading those words over and over. Predictable, static.